The Gormenghast Trilogy by Mervyn Peake. Book 1. Titus Groan. A Field of Flagstones. He refused to allow himself to think of the sickening drop, and glued his eyes upon the first of the grips. His left hand clasped the lintel as he felt out with his right foot and curled his toes around a rough corner of stone. Almost at once he began to sweat. His fingers crept up and found a cranny he had scrutinized at leisure. Biting his underlip until it bled freely over his chin, he moved his left knee up the surface of the wall. It took him perhaps 17 minutes by the clock, but by the time of his beating heart he was all evening upon the swaying wall. At moments he would make up his mind to have done with the whole thing, life and all, and to drop back into space, where his straining and sickness would end. At other moments, as he clung desperately, working his way upwards in a sick haze, he found himself repeating a line or two from some long-forgotten rhyme. His fingers were almost dead and his hands and knees shaking wildly when he found that his face was being tickled by the ragged fibres that hung upon the end of the dead creeper. Gripping it with his right hand, his toes lost purchase, and for a moment or two he swung over the empty air. But his hands could bring into play unused muscles, and although his arms were cracking, he scraped his way up the remaining 15 feet, the thick, brittle wood holding true, small pieces only breaking away from the sides. As soon as he had edged himself over the guttering, he lay, face downwards, weak and shaking fantastically. He lay there for an hour. Then, as he raised his head and found himself in an empty world of rooftops, he smiled. It was a young smile, a smile in keeping with his 17 years, that suddenly transformed the emptiness of the lower part of his face and as suddenly disappeared. From where he lay at an angle along the sun-warmed slates, only sections of this new rooftop world were visible, and the vastness of the failing sky. He raised himself upon his elbows and suddenly noticed that where his feet had been prized against the guttering, the support was on the point of giving way. The corroded metal was all that lay between the weight of his body as he lay slanting steeply on the slates and the long drop to the quadrangle. Without a moment's delay he began to edge his way up the incline, levering with his bare feet, his shoulder blades rubbing the moss-patched roof. Although his limbs felt much stronger after their rest, he retched as he moved up the slate incline. The slope was longer than it had appeared from below. Indeed, all of the various roof structures, parapet, turret and cornice, proved themselves to be of greater dimensions than he had anticipated. Steerpike, when he had reached the spine of the roof, sat astride it and regained his breath for the second time. He was surrounded by lakes of fading daylight. He could see how the ridge on which he sat led in a wide curve to where in the west it was broken by the first of 4 towers. Beyond them the sweep of roof continued to complete a half-circle far to his right. This was ended by a high lateral wall. Stone steps led from the ridge to the top of the wall, from which might be approached, along a catwalk, an area the size of a field, surrounding which, though at a lower level, were the heavy, rotting structures of adjacent roofs and towers, and between these could be seen other roofs far away and other towers. Steerpike's eyes, following the rooftops, came at last to the parapet surrounding this area. He could not, of course, from where he was, guess at the stone sky field itself, lying as it did a league away and well above his eye level. But as the main massing of Gormenghast arose to the west, he began to crawl in that direction along the sweep of the ridge. It was over an hour before Steerpike came to where only the surrounding parapet obstructed his view of the stone sky field. As he climbed this parapet with tired, tenacious limbs, he was unaware that only a few seconds of time at a few blocks of vertical stone divided him from seeing what had not been seen for over 400 years. Scrabbling one knee over the topmost stones, he heaved himself over the rough wall. When he lifted his head wearily to see what his next obstacle might be, he saw before him, spreading over an area of 4 square acres, a desert of grey stone slabs. The parapet on which he was now sitting bolt upright surrounded the whole area, and swinging his legs over, he dropped the 4 odd feet to the ground. As he dropped and then leaned back to support himself against the wall, a crane arose at a far corner of the stone field and, with a slow beating of its wings, drifted over the distant battlements and dropped out of sight. The sun was beginning to set in a violet haze, and the stone field, save for the tiny figure of Steerpike, spread out emptily, the cold slabs catching the prevailing tint of the sky. Between the slabs there was a dark moss and the long, coarse necks of seeding grasses. Steerpike's greedy eyes had devoured the arena. What use could it be put to? Since his escape, this surely was the strongest card for the pack that he intended to collect. Why, or how, or when he would use his hoarded scraps of knowledge he could not tell, that was for the future. Now he knew only that by risking his life he had come across an enormous quadrangle as secret as it was naked, as hidden as it was open to the wrath of tenderness of the elements. As he gave at the knees and collapsed into a half-sleeping, half-fainting huddle by the wall, the stone field wavered in a purple blush, and the sun withdrew.